worker. Or it's the high-ranking gold employees. They get to live in beautiful homes such as you see here. Notice it is entirely screened in. So this type of housing, again, it would be for the top brass, if you will, that worked on the Panama Canal. Those communities were created at various places across the isthmus. A lot more support facilities and infrastructure had to be created besides just housing. Since there was a large number of families among the workforce, obviously there were children who had to be provided for, so he had schools built. Segregation carried over here as well. The majority of the black workers came from the island of Barbados. The schools were segregated. And again, here you can see we're looking at a school for the white kids, and now the Canal Zone School for black kids. Then they decided to add more to the infrastructure to establish post offices all throughout the Canal Zone. So with this large population, we're talking about possibly 25,000 people, there also was a need for a police force. So this was the next project Stevens took on. A police force was established. They had several stations in various communities scattered across the isthmus. Another early decision by Stevens was also to tackle the problem of disease in the Canal Zone, and that Dr. Gorgas' ideas would be implemented under the leadership of Mr. Stevens. It had to be resolved. So with Stevens' support, Gorgas launched an all-out effort to eradicate mosquitoes, which he knew spread malaria and yellow fever in spite of the opposition, in spite of the ridicule to his ideas, again, by the government and the military. What would have happened if Stevens didn't back him? So his work involved fumigating and spraying to eliminate the breeding places for mosquitoes. It involved clearing drainage ways. It involved hand spraying of chemicals and covering standing water that could not be drained with oil. So these mule-drawn wagons, they became a very common sight throughout the entire Panama Zone area. U.S. authorities even went in the native villages and they put in water stands with proper drainage systems. Many of these villagers had previously used open barrels to collect rainwater, which is a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. Here's another example. This was North Avenue in Panama City. This shows you what it looked like before Gorgas and his men came in to eradicate any areas of standing water. Not only that, they did a little beautification project, and later it looked like this. So a basic measure that Dr. Gorgas implemented was to isolate people who contracted yellow fever or malaria. This isolation, of course, was intended to keep infected blood from being available to mosquitoes. They got to bite somebody infected and then bite someone else, right? So he started this isolation project in the hospital. This was a major departure from what the French did. They did not know how the diseases were transmitted. They believed, again, that, as I mentioned earlier, most likely the source was crawling bugs. So here's what they did. To keep these crawling bugs from sick hospital patients, the French set the legs of the bed in pans of water to keep the bugs from crawling up into the bed. Well, needless to say, by doing this, the French created breeding places for mosquitoes right there in the hospital. Well, they just didn't have any other knowledge at the time. So another big change Stevens made was the policy regarding wives. He decided the workers could bring their wives to Panama. They had previously been excluded to most of the workers. So Stevens encouraged all married men to send for their families, kids and wives. So even though workers came from all over the world, again, the large majority of the workers were blacks who came from the West Indies. They estimate some 20,000 of the laborers that worked on the Panama Canal came from the island of Barbados. Well, in November 1906, President Theodore Roosevelt did something that no other sitting U.S. president had ever done previously. He actually left the United States to go check out the Panama Canal. No sitting U.S. president had ever done anything like this before, which is traveling outside the United States. So he decided to go to Panama and check it out. He wanted to see the project that he had actively supported. And on top of that, he purposely chose November to make the trip. That would be at the height of the rainy season. He decided he wanted to see Panama up close, firsthand, in the worst possible weather. Well, he got his wish. So when he did arrive, well, of course, it was the rainy season. Rainy conditions were there just as expected. In fact, on the second day of his visit, there were 3 inches of rain in 2 hours. So the president didn't let the rain stop him, though. He went on his planned tour. He visited virtually all of the work areas along the Panama Canal. So he climbed up on the steam shovel. He posed at the controls. And of course, this is a very iconic image from his visit to the Panama Canal, showing the president inside the shovel at the controls. But again, it was a pose shot. He didn't actually operate it. I don't even know if he'd know where to put the key in. Well, Roosevelt decided to appoint a replacement to the position of chief engineer because Stevens he decided to resign. He burned out. I mean, look at all of these incredible projects that he had completed. He just had enough. So he resigned. So this gentleman here, Major George Washington Goethals from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, now took over the Panama Canal project. Then they added another gentleman from the Army Corps of Engineers. This officer here, he came to Panama with Goethals. His name was Major David Galliard. He was responsible for creating the famous Culebra Cut, the most difficult portion of the Panama Canal to excavate for a number of reasons. So second only to Goethals, his name is probably the most well-known for all those who worked on the canal back in the United States. So the Culebra Cut went on in earnest. This section was so difficult because of the geology and because of the height and because of the constant mudslides that it took from 1907 to 1913 to actually get it completed. During these years, in addition to the daunting task of digging out millions of cubic yards of soil, again, he faced the problem of dealing with landslides. We still have landslides going on and mudslides going on in the Panama Canal today. It didn't just go away. So we'll see some dredging operations when we go through the canal, and I'll cover that in my pictorial tomorrow.